Hi there guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be bringing you a head-to-head battle between two of my favourite dive watches. Now I'm going to be talking about the Phoibos Wavemaster and the Seiko Padi Turtle. Now I've picked these two pieces because they are very similar in terms of pricing. They're both available for around about the £250 mark in the UK, so I thought it would make a good comparison between a well-established brand and a well-established style of watch in the Seiko Padi Turtle, and a newcomer in the realm of watches with the Phoibos Wavemaster. So to compare a historic versus a new brand, I thought would be really cool. Quick wristwatch check, I'm wearing my G-Shock today, which if you saw my last video I covered in my Casio collection. I'll probably make a review of this at some point. Very well known watch, but I'd like to give my own take on it because I think it's a very cool piece indeed. But with that said, let's get into today's video and see which watch comes out on top. So in terms of how we're going to judge today's head-to-head, it will be in 6 categories, and those categories are value/specs, brand, quality, performance/design, looks/style, and versatility. Now each category will have a total of 10 marks that can be awarded to each piece, and we'll have a total of 60 marks altogether, so up to 60 marks, and then obviously whoever trumps it overall is the winner of today's head-to-head. Now we're going to start with value/specs. Let's just start by moving this copy of Lume down. So as you can probably see, the Phoibos has scored a 9 for value and the Seiko Turtle has scored an 8. Now to talk you through why this is, in terms of value, what I'm really talking about here is the specs for the price. I know you've got two quite different watches. You've got a watch from a very well established brand like Seiko, and you've got a watch from a new micro brand like Phoibos, and now these two brands value very different things. So if we talk about Phoibos to begin with, what they really care about is the amazing spec for the money. And with Phoibos you get a sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating, you get a really nice ceramic bezel, you get an absolutely fantastic bracelet which has screwed links and a mill clasp, and just generally there's a level of spec here which you'd have to pay a lot more from an established brand. Having a ceramic bezel on such an affordable piece is absolutely amazing. Whilst it's not the highest quality piece of ceramic I've ever seen, it is very nice. Now when it comes to Seiko, they really do value different things to Phoibos, and what they value here is the fact that this is a professional diver. This is an ISO certified diver, as it's part of their Pro Spec line, and it's even endorsed by the Padi Association for this particular special edition. And not only that, this also uses an in-house movement, and whilst these two watches do fundamentally have the same movement, it's got more horological impact in the Seiko as it is their own in-house movement as well. And in terms of the spec as well, you've got this amazing Lume bright, which is a fantastic lume and is far better than the Phoibos in my opinion. The bracelet it comes on is okay. As you've probably noticed, this is on a Jubilee, a third-party Jubilee. The bracelet's fine, but it's pin and collar system bracelet, which I really dislike. Stamp clasp, and it's a bit bulky, so having it on this really slim, very flexible Jubilee is pretty cool. So the reason I think Phoibos wins that one is because they offer spec that will appeal to more people. More people will be taken in by the ceramic and the sapphire than they will be with the Seiko, with the fact that it's got an in-house movement and it's ISO certified. And whilst from a horological standpoint, this actually it might be more impressive for the spec, I think when you're talking about actual value for the parts and components of which you're paying, I think the Phoibos does win with the 9 versus the 8 of the Seiko. So we're going to move on to brands next, and there's absolutely no surprise there. So Phoibos scores a 5 and Seiko scores a 10 out of 10. And what I should just quickly say actually is that these scores are relative for the price band of watch we're talking about today, which is the sort of £250 to £300 watch. Obviously if this was going up against a Rolex, these would have very different scores, but it's all relative to the competition and the price band of which this watch is in. So yep, as I said, Phoibos 5 and Seiko is a 10. We'll start with Seiko this time. So they're founded in 1881. They own their own factories. They've really disrupted the industry when it came to the quartz crisis and also horological masterpieces coming out of Japan. They're respected by all watch collectors, and even people who aren't into watches particularly, they all know who Seiko are, and they know that they're so well respected. I'm pretty sure that they were responsible for the first Japanese made chronograph as well, which is an amazing achievement for the Japanese, and they're just absolutely groundbreaking company when it comes to the watch world. On the flip side, you've got Phoibos, who were only founded 4 years ago in 2016. Now, they have got an absolutely fantastic reputation in the microbrand community. They're very respected, and probably the best thing about Phoibos is the amount that they listen to their fans. I remember when they released their Sentinel watch, they actually put to the community a few different designs and let them choose the one that they were most fond of, and they went forward with that particular design. But saying that, they have got a long way to go. They've only been around for 4 years, but it's been a very impressive journey in such a short time. And to go from making homage watches to making your own designs in the space of 4 years is very impressive for such a young company. And I think a couple of years ago it would have been lower than a 5, but I think they've really cemented themselves as a strong microbrand coming out of the Far East. And I think with time to come, that score could potentially get stronger. But whether they'll ever meet the levels of Seiko, I find it highly unlikely. They'll have to be a very innovative company and really do something groundbreaking to get anywhere near the heights of Seiko. Now, in terms of quality, we've got a 9 on the Seiko Turtle and 8 on the Phoibos Wavemaster. Now, quality is very subjective, but what I'm talking about here is I'm talking about the finishing, I'm talking about how well put together it is, the individual components, how sort of high quality are they. And starting with the Seiko, for me this has been an absolutely fantastic watch. You can see here that the finishing on the hands and the indices are absolutely flawless. And whilst a lot of people have had trouble with misaligned bezels, mine's been absolutely perfect. Screw down crown has been fantastic since day one, extremely secure. Finishing, while simple, is very effective. You've got extremely high polish on the sides, brushed on the top of the case, and then a slightly higher shine on the actual sides. Now if we actually look at the back of the watch as well, see how well you can see that. This has got a really nice case back with a hooker's eye wave on it, which is obviously very associated with Seiko at this point. Now the only reason it is slightly lower is because of the quality of the bracelets, but I appreciate at this price, from an established brand, you really can't have it all, especially when they're using their own in-house movement as well. You know, in terms of the actual quality, I still think that this piece is the best in terms of that category around about this price range. Now the Phoibos still comes in with an extremely respectable 8 out of 10. Now the quality of the ceramic I mentioned is good. For the price it's absolutely fantastic to get ceramic at this price. The only thing that does frustrate me with the Phoibos is the level of the finishing slightly. So in terms of these indices, you might be able to see they're not the most defined. And in terms of the finishing on the hands, there are a couple of scrapes here and there which the camera can't really pick up, and it is a very minor issue. But when you're talking about the levels of finishing that Seiko bring, I don't feel that Phoibos quite match. Now I think the finishing on the case is absolutely lovely. I've got a slightly older version which is a high polished finish on the actual side of the case. I know the newer models have brushed, so we can't really comment on the finishing of that new model particularly, but in terms of the one that I've got, it is very good. It's this sort of black base style case with extremely high polish. You've got almost sort of a chamfered edge, then leading onto brushed on the top. And in terms of the quality of the bracelet, I've already mentioned it is absolutely fantastic. So it's a push button deployment with a mill clasp, and it is extremely secure, and this is genuinely the best bracelet I've ever used, only coming in second to my Christopher Ward bracelet, which is a watch in a completely different price category. So to be sort of up there is the best that I've used with that says a lot about the quality of this bracelet. Now we're going to move on to performance and design. Now Phoibos comes in with a 7 on this category and Seiko comes in with a 10. So we'll start with the Phoibos. What you've got here is you've got some really decent lume. It's good, it's not mind-blowing, and part of the reason it's not mind-blowing is, for me, the markers on the actual dial are just too small from a legibility point of view, and that does hamper the actual performance of the lume. Now, on the newer models, these indices are actually larger, so this problem will be slightly more resolved on the newer models, but I can only talk about the model that I've got in front of me, and to be honest, I've got no experience with that new model, so the markers are slightly too small. But talking about the actual applied markings, they're still very nice in terms of their colour, and despite being small, against a black dial with orange accents, the baby blue is very legible, which is just why it's frustrating that the markers are so small on my model. And now, whilst this watch isn't ISO certified, it's still 300 meters water resistant with a screw down case back and a screw down crown, which is a very sturdy crown, I'll just quickly add. So despite it not having that certification, I'm confident that this piece would be able to take an absolute beating, and you'd be able to do any sort of diving with it, as I don't believe that anyone actually dives beyond about 200, 300 meters anyway, so this would be more than up to the task. And now also the ceramic, it is very durable. Now I've had this watch for at least a year and a half now, and there aren't really any marks on the bezel at all. Now it is a fingerprint magnet, but that doesn't affect the performance or the design. The ceramic is really good, really strong, and really hasn't picked up any marks at all. The bezel is also a good one. It's 120 click unidirectional, so it is really good. It is very slightly misaligned. I've gone one too far, but it is very slightly misaligned, which doesn't really affect performance. But if you're looking for really precise engineering, it does miss out slightly there, but it still gets a very respectable 7 out of 10. Another Seiko I've put down as a 10 out of 10. I think at this price point, you can only really look at this watch and maybe a couple of the Citizen divers in terms of being at this level. The lume is absolutely ridiculous. It is the Seiko Lume Bright, and if you check out my Seiko Turtle review, I've got a lume shot in there. It's absolutely ridiculous. It glows for hours on end, and it's so legible. The applied markers are large and filled with lume. Again, these sort of white, or they're slightly off-white with the fact that my watch is aged slightly, against this blue sunburst style, sorry. Just extremely legible, stands out and really clear, and even underwater this is a very, very easy watch to read. Now this has only got 200 meters dive resistance compared to the 300 of the Phoibos, but for me that's irrelevant because this is ISO certified and it's also endorsed by Padi, which is a professional divers association. So for me, this has got all the things necessary to be a good diver. It's got the authenticity of being certified, it's got the design, it's got the legibility, it's got a really strong screw down crown, and it's got a really reliable day-date movement in there. And for me, I like having a day-day movement. I think it's really good. And whilst this isn't on the stock strap does have a diver's extension as well, which the Phoibos does not. So if you want to go diving with the Padi, you wearing a wetsuit, there's no problem because you've got that diver's extension, which gives you a bit more leeway in terms of the actual fit. So moving on, we've got looks and style. And now both of these watches actually score 8 out of 8 on this category. And this is extremely subjective. So for you, the Padi could be a 3 and the Phoibos could be a 10 or vice versa. So this is very subjective. And for me, they fill different sort of roles in my collection. So the Seiko, it's a tall watch. It's a retro tall watch, very 80s, and it is built to perform in a diving situation. I think the cushion case is so unique. I think it's got really good uniqueness that you don't see on many pieces, particularly around this price range. And in terms of the bezel as well, I really like it. It helps to add to the retro look, having that aluminium insert and having that Pepsi. I think it's awesome, and the dial is absolutely gorgeous. When you get this out in the sun, it does look absolutely fantastic. It's a really wonderful piece. And whilst the stop bracelet isn't the best, I do think it suits the watch well, and it is nice looking. Now for me, the Phoibos, whilst this is a tall watch, it is slightly dressier. It's got the ceramic, obviously, which makes it look a lot more premium. There are a lot of watches in this price category. And it's the sort of watch where you could wear it at the pool or in the ocean and then go to dinner, wearing it afterwards. So it is very versatile as well in that respect, and it's a do-it-all watch. It's also got some nice homages to some other watches. Now obviously with that wave dial, it's a very obvious homage in that respect to the Seamaster. And also the case is very much a black bay case. So it's got a couple of nods to well-known and well-loved divers, which it doesn't rely on those nods and those little bits of homage. It's got its own character and characteristics, but it just sort of references it and pays homage to those wonderful pieces and those wonderful companies. So for me, this is a category which is extremely subjective, and I think both pieces are absolutely excellent. I think in terms of little niggles, I think the Seiko, for me, I prefer the aluminium to be a bit thicker. I think it chips a bit easily, and for me, with the Phoibos, it's what I said before, it's the indices are just physically too small, but I think it's got a fantastic colour combination between the orange and the baby blue. I think it's awesome, but those are very minor niggles for both watches. So moving on to the last category, we've got versatility. So for the Seiko, we've got a 9, and for the Phoibos, we've got an 8. Starting with the Seiko, it wears a lot smaller than a 44 odd millimeter watch would suggest. It wears very comfortably on the wrist due to the short lug to lug and this cushion case. The other good thing about the Seiko is that there's an infinite amount of mods that you can actually do to this piece, whether you want to put a different hand on it, a different bezel, a different face, different bracelets which have been made for this actual watch. You've got so many options, and to be honest, you've got more options on the Seiko than you have really on any other watch. And if you get bored of this watch, I could change this to a Batman bezel if I want, and it completely changes the look of the piece. And I think that's a versatility that you get with very few brands and very few watches. It's not the dressiest watch. It is a tall watch, and it's a retro style tall watch at that. So yeah, it's not the dressiest piece, but at the end of the day, you don't buy this to wear it with a suit. I mean, you can if you want, but that's not what it's designed for. The colour scheme and handset maybe doesn't lend itself to be the most versatile on different colour straps. The fact that you've got the blue, red, and the sunburst dial. I find that mainly solid straps work best on this in terms of the colour. But yeah, it is still quite versatile with that. Now onto the Phoibos. This is a very different piece. So this is both a dressy and a sporty piece, as I sort of mentioned in the looks and style. 42mm with about 49 lug to lug, so it is a larger piece, but it will fit most people. And again, it's a black diver, so it will go with most different straps and most outfits, to be fair, as well. And the only reason this scores lower than the Seiko Turtle is because of the amount of mods actually available for the Seiko. You just can't compare it, to be completely honest. I can change up the look of my Seiko without much effort at all, and instead of having to buy a completely different piece, if I want to have a Batman watch for a bit with a blue and black dial, bezel side, I can just change the bezel, and it's just a freedom that you don't get with other watches, and unfortunately the Phoibos just can't match that. But it's still a very versatile piece, and it scores extremely highly with an 8 out of 10. So we'll go on to the final add up of the scores. So the Phoibos gets a very respectable 45 out of 60, but the Seiko does win it with a 54 out of 60. For me, thought it would be slightly closer actually, but where Phoibos really gets left behind is in the brand category. And to be honest, without that brand category, it would have been a hell of a lot closer. And Phoibos would have had a slightly stronger showing. But I've got to say, to score that highly, is a real testament to the quality of Phoibos and what they've managed to achieve in just a few years. And for Seiko, I'm not surprised by the score because they should be dominating this category, and they still do, in my opinion. I think it's quite an interesting comparison, is looking at a well-established brand and watch like Seiko with the Turtle, and then also looking at the micro brand with the Phoibos, because your head for the specs and value kind of says Phoibos, but then for me, my heart will always say Seiko. But saying that, I love both pieces. I'm not going to sell either of them. I'm especially not going to sell this at any point. You can see the scars this watch has picked up, particularly on the bezel. It's an amazing piece, and if you're interested in either of them, I would absolutely recommend it. But that's it for the jewel. I might potentially look at doing some more of these in the future because it was quite a fun video to actually put together. But if you enjoyed the video, please remember to like and comment down below. Let me know what you think if you had either of these two pieces in your collection. And if you're new to the channel, please remember to subscribe. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Without any further ado, I'll catch you in the next one.